All right. Good evening, everyone. Happy Wednesday. I had to look for a second. We'll give everybody a chance to come in here. We're going to be talking Bigfoot tonight. The Bigfoot War with the Choctaw. So, a little different, little change of pace, but this should be fun. I've done a fair amount of research on this, and that can be an adventure in itself for sure. Give it a minute. We'll let everybody come in. If you want to support our work tonight, we have super chats where you can click on the dollar sign on the bottom there. Toss us a couple bucks to support the work here if you are so inclined. Let's see. Oh, we got over 10 people already. Okay, so we'll just jump into it. So this is an alleged story, right? It's kind of dark in here. There we go. That'll work. All right. So this allegedly took place in southeastern Oklahoma in 1855. So let's go. Oh, I was trying to think about how to organize this, right? First, let's go over the general story. Then we'll go over who is Bigfoot and who are the Choctaw and whether I think it really happened, might have, or and also whether you think it really happened. So the general story, there's a couple different versions of this, but the synopsis of this is in the Curtin County Wilderness area in 1855. The Choctaw had relatively recently been moved to Oklahoma from their homelands in the southeast. And basically, that's the Trail of Tears. So all of these southeastern tribes got moved out of the area, moved to Oklahoma. It's a brand new place, just like if you got moved from California to Pennsylvania, right? That'd be a brand new place. You have to do some adjusting and you have some new neighbors. And they were constantly under attack. They were constantly having problems from neighboring tribes. They were constantly having problems from the government. And now, allegedly, I'm going to be saying that a lot tonight, several members of a local Choctaw village go missing. It's women, it's children, it's a couple of the older men. And this happens over a number of weeks. And they, obviously want to do something about it. So a man named Joshua LaFleur, that's a tough one, and a family of other Choctaws named the Tubby family. What's up, Dan? What's up, Pet Detective? Short Stories by Kate. Good to see you. So his family called the Tubby family, real name, alleged people, but real name from the Choctaw. Everybody we're talking about here is part of the Choctaw Nation. They go out, they get together with a couple other guys. They mount up, they head out into the woods. Now, when you think about Oklahoma, you probably think, as did I, just big expanses of plains. It's big, wide open territory, but really, just like anywhere else, there's a lot of variation to it. In southeastern Oklahoma and the eastern part of Oklahoma ties into the Ozarks. So you get a lot of thick, piney forests. And that's what we're talking about here. So they go out in the forest. They find a large mound, like a big dirt mound that's got body parts littered all over the place from everybody, right? Again, this is a tough one with YouTube TOS, but body parts from everyone all over the place. Let's say that. They look around going, who did this, right? Like what tribe, what people are responsible for this? And they hear 3 people take off through the woods and then 3 more people rumbling around in the bushes. Then all of a sudden, 3 Bigfoot jump out of the bushes and start attacking them. They start attacking back. They get into a fight. There's 3 Bigfoots running away, 3 that they're fighting. The first part of the attack, Joshua LaFleur attacks one of the Bigfoot, and he gets his little head just like popped off like a beer bottle cap, right? Just the other guys, the Tubbies, the heroic Tubbies, who are supposed to be big, giant guys, but they're all like 6'4", 300 pounds is what the accounts say. But they're expert horsemen also. That's probably the most dubious part of the whole story to me. But so they get on their horses, they ride over to the Bigfoot, they have a knife fight with them. 2 of the Bigfoot get taken out by knives. One gets wounded, runs away, and they take LaFleur's body and they go back home. They tell everybody what happened and they say, hell of a thing, right? And then the Bigfoot are no more in the Choctaw area. Pennsylvania Plowboy, good to see you. Good to see you. Glad everybody's showing up. This is going to be a fun one. So that's our basic story. LaFleur and the Tubbies versus Bigfoot family. So let's kind of go over, first, let's go over who are the Choctaw? We kind of covered it a little bit. How'd they get out to Oklahoma? They were moved out there on the Trail of Tears, but originally they're one of the, this is the official term, not my term, 5 civilized tribes. That's all from the Southeast. That's the, oh geez, the Alabama tribe. Geez, who's in the 5? I should have looked that up. But Choctaw, Seminole, a couple others. Anybody know in the chat? That was one part that I forgot to look up. I did a little too much Bigfoot research, not enough 5 tribes research. They were a preeminent tribe in the Southeast. Obviously, they speak Choctaw. They're kind of related to the Muskogee people, distantly, I believe. Yeah, they're related to the Chickasaw, the Creek, and the Seminole peoples. The Creek are the Muskogee, so interchangeable. They have lots of oral traditions in the Southeast from the Choctaw and other tribes of large ape-like men. This is kind of a continent-wide thing, but especially in this area, especially in the Northwest, in the Pacific Northwest and the Southeast, you'll see a lot of it. They called it the Champe. It's Shampe, the Champe. And so it already played into their lore before they came out to Oklahoma. So they got to Oklahoma. I'm just kind of giving you the too long, didn't read version here. They were also the mounds are a familiar part of their culture from the Southeast. That's the mounds in the Southeast, particularly Mississippi and Alabama, date back centuries, right? So that's a well-established kind of prefabricated part to this legend. So the Choctaw were moved out to Oklahoma. The men are they're kind of semi-agricultural. They farm beans, squash, corn, the 3 sisters. They hunt deer, turkey, bear. They fish. This kind of changes when they move out to Oklahoma. You're living a little more off of reservation allotments. So their way of life changes a little bit, but it's a decades-long process. Let's see. They had first Spanish contact in 1540. So they've had long relationships with Spain and France, a little bit with Britain, with the Americans, and ended up, they actually, this is a typical Jacksonian thing, right? And I'm not saying pro-Jackson or anti-Jackson. I'm just saying this is an Andrew Jackson thing to do. They sided with the Americans during the War of 1812. They sided with Andrew Jackson himself in the Battle of New Orleans. And Jackson was still like, sorry, guys, you got to go. He sent him to Oklahoma with the Indian Removal Act of, I believe, 1832, which Davy Crockett opposed vehemently. If you haven't seen the story on that, go watch our Davy Crockett at the Alamo episode. But regardless, they're sent out to Oklahoma. This is in 1831 to 1833. So they're sent out in waves, and more of them keep arriving. They have a really harsh winter the first time, outbreaks of cholera. So lots of them are passing away. They have a really tough couple of decades. And in 1855 is when they are allegedly involved with this Bigfoot incident, right? So a common theme for Southeastern tribes. So, and there's a lot of, like I said, a lot of prefabrication, I guess, cultural precedent for involvement with the Bigfoot. So they kind of already have some cultural lore surrounding this. And so when they move out to Southeastern Oklahoma, it wouldn't be an entirely new thing for the Choctaw. It wouldn't be an entirely new thing for the Kiowa, a lot of the tribes that inhabited kind of the Oklahoma down to eastern Texas area. And it's still a hot spot for Bigfoot researchers today, which leads us into our second point here. Who is Bigfoot? And he goes by a number of names, obviously Sasquatch, Bigfoot. Those are the 2 that are coming to mind. Let's see. It's a worldwide thing, right? Lots of cultures have these ape men. Oh, the skunk ape. Yeti is kind of a Nepalese animal. The grass man. Yeah, throw me some more in the chat here. What else? What are some regional names for Bigfoot? Several of the tribes in the northwest, tribes in the Sierras in California, obviously tribes in the southeast, tribes in the northeast, anywhere there's a significant amount of woods, there seems to be reports, which, it would be fair to think they're not pulled from whole cloth, of large, hairy men, doing stuff like this, stealing everything from stealing food to stealing people. Sometimes it's mischievous, sometimes it's malevolent, and sometimes it sways back and forth between the two. The Wallyboger, Nick Fodness says the Wallyboger. Is that a real thing? Troy says the hairy man. Shorts by Kate says swamp man. Dan Robertson says Gigantopithecus. Sure, and Gigantopithecus was supposedly a real thing, right? So there's biological precedent for this too. Let's see. The actual, so there's, it's a continent-wide thing in America, at least. The Pacific Northwesterners, the coastal Salish, call them Sasquatch, which is kind of the etymology for Sasquatch. In Alaska, the Tlingit call them Nantinak. I pronounced these before, but they're tough for me, even with rehearsal. In California, the Yokuts, who are up in the Sierras, call him the hairy man, and the Choctaw call him either Champay or Champy. So it's an integral part of lots of native cultures. So this 1855 incident wasn't pulled from thin air. There's lots of, like I said, cultural precedents for this, and there's lots of geographical precedents, I guess. Lots of people in this area before the Choctaw arrived had lots of folklore about hairy men in the mountains. And it's fair to say a lot of that is just to keep kids out of the woods, sure. But, decades, centuries worth of reports, at least, bear some merit in investigation. So this brings us to, let me make sure I'm not missing anything on our Bigfoot research. So let's see. Oh, yeah. So there's lots of, Bigfoot has become a cultural phenomenon, right? This wasn't the case in the 1850s. This was lots of pieced together folklore, but there wasn't a nationwide known creature such as Bigfoot. That's kind of a product of the 1950s on, especially a product of the Patterson-Gimlin film. I'd like to hear in the chat what y'all think about the Patterson-Gimlin film. My take on that in particular is that it's a forgery. It's a fake. I've got lots of family up in the area where it was filmed. It wouldn't be unheard of for a couple local dudes to get together to fake a Bigfoot video. I think just by looking at it, a lot of it doesn't present as a actual bipedal ape, right? It just by sight looks like someone in a costume. It doesn't walk like an ape. A lot of it, even looking back at the camera and not being shocked that someone is filming it, it just doesn't add up. And there's been several reports of the guys who were involved either kind of denouncing it later on or deathbed confessions saying like, that was a hoax, right? Even though that has made staunch believers of many. And even today, there are many staunch believers, Bigfoot researchers, also known as squatchers, which is not a derogatory term. I'm just saying that's the term that I learned. Many squatchers believe that the 1855 Choctaw War was a real thing. If it is real, it's a terrible incident. We're talking about the lost lives of many women, many children, several warriors, somebody's head getting popped off. It's a horrific story if true. Let me check the chat real quick. Were black bear and brown bear found naturally in that region at the time? Dan Robertson asks. Yes, black bear, not brown bear, but black bear for certain. They're still there today. And today there's still lots of reports, lots of Sasquatch research being done in southeastern Oklahoma, which is kind of counterintuitive if you're not on the squatcher scene. But I watched a lot of videos of the guys traveling around this area, and it would make sense. It's dense forest. It's comparable to the Pacific Northeast, at least in the thickness of the forest. The trees maybe not as big, but enough to cover up an ape man. Yeah, I think so. Let's see. Pet Detective says he went to the movies to watch the Patterson-Gimlin film. You went to the movies to watch it. They showed it I didn't know they showed it at the movies. I guess I never thought about how they distributed it in the 70s, 60s. Right. Okay. Bob Hieronymus is the guy who was involved with the Patterson-Gimlin film. Was it a deathbed confession? Or later on, he said like, no, that was a hoax. Though there are many, many Sasquatch researchers who are ardent that is, if not their biggest point of proof, one of their biggest, right? a big part of the research that I did into this, which we talked about a little bit before already on these live streams. Art Bell, a fantastic resource, whether you believe the guys or not. I listened to a guy from the Santa Cruz Bigfoot Museum who gets very upset if you question the existence of Bigfoot at all, who says we have found everything from droppings to hair samples to living areas where the grass is all flattened out. Okay. There was, I wish I could remember the guy's name now, but one guy who had several recordings of Sasquatch in the woods, supposedly talking to each other, supposedly talking to the campers who were recording this. And listen, he sounds like a nice guy. I think this dude's a cool guy. He's got like a deep kind of Texan accent. He clearly genuinely believes what he's saying. But if that is Bigfoot talking to each other, I will eat my hat. I'll do it right here on the live stream. I don't have a hat on right now, but I do own one. I will eat it on the live stream if that's not just two dudes yelling at each other, because they're going like, oh, blah, 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 wah, wah, wah. It's just clearly two dudes in the woods yelling at each other. But it's a good episode. I'll put it in the description here. When we get done, if you haven't watched, if after you're done watching our episodes, go watch this coast to coast interview. It might even be coast to coast. It might be Art Bell's later show, but fantastic interview. The Sierra Sounds. No, this isn't the Sierra Sounds. So the Sierra Sounds is another big point of evidence for the Sasquatch researchers. That is actually in the Sierras, which is where the Yokuts lived. And you hear kind of a similar thing. I think the Sierra Sounds are a little more realistic. They do sound. They don't sound like guys pulling a prank, right? It sounds like these guys are listening to sounds way off in the distance. And that's the area I've got the most experience with. I grew up, I don't know, an hour from the Sierras. And I always thought like, look, I'm not too sure about Bigfoot existing, but if he does exist, he could be, I would think the California woods would be a premier place for him. Let's see here. So I'm going to kind of go over the research method. Yeah, the research organizations of Bigfoot. These are the guys providing most of the information on this tale, on this particular incident, right? The premier organization is the BFRO, the Bigfoot Research Organization. I am not good with what do you call it when you have three letters in a row? Whatever it is. Not great with those. But the Bigfoot Research Organization does all the heavy lifting, most of the heavy lifting in the Bigfoot world. They, like I said, have all these biological samples. They've got lots of hair samples, like I said, droppings, tons of footprints, footprint casts, and lots of reports from the area that do carry on even till today. Like it's a common report in southeastern Oklahoma that, they're still out there stealing chickens, stealing dogs, just causing havoc. So this now that we kind of got the groundwork laid, the actual alleged incident itself, it sounds more like a battle from everything that I'm able to find. So it's not actually a war, but the veracity of it has some gaping holes in it, right? I think the first one is obviously the actual existence of these Bigfoots. So that presents its own problem, but let's set that to the side for a second. There's not a lot or any evidence of the Tubbies existing. There's some earlier chiefs in the Choctaw who had like Hollow Tubby. It would be like the name where Tubby would be kind of at the end, but there's no actual records of anybody under that, a family of 3 warriors who were big giant guys under that name. There's no record of that, especially during that time. Joshua LaFleur, there's some records. I found some research says he did exist, but it would be 1877 he was born. So that's 22 years after the fact. That would rule him out. There's no record of a Joshua LaFleur existing at the time, but several researchers present the counterpoint that the county that this happened in is Lafleur County. But really, the family named Lafleur was just very influential in the founding and settlement of the area. So doesn't mean there's a whole lot of veracity to it being named Lafleur either. The mounds in the area have not been found, so unless they were taken down, that's a bit of a problem. And there's no reports from the tribe who would have been able to report to local Indian Affairs agencies on or near their reservations that something was happening. Might have been even able to acquire U.S. Army assistance, but none of that exists. Does that mean that it's impossible? Let's get into it here. What do I think? And I want to know what y'all think. Let me know in the chat, and I'll break down what I think. Long story short, I think nothing's impossible, right? Is it absolutely impossible that this happened? No. But as a historian, I think we have to err on the side of the evidence that we have. Now, if you're a Bigfoot researcher out there, I'd love to have you on, and I'd love to have you disprove me, at least, make me think a little bit more about this. But I don't think that if we don't have any record, if we don't have any written record, we don't have any physical evidence, and we don't have any after the fact forensic evidence like the mounds or the bodies of the missing people, I think that presents an insurmountable level of burden of proof that just can't be met. So do I think it happened? I do not. I would have to say it did not happen. But there are other legends from other tribes that are very similar. The Kiowa have a story like this where the Bigfoot were coming, and same thing. They were stealing their food, and then they're going, oh, okay, well, I guess we can live with that. And then they started stealing their women and children and elderly, and they're like, dog, we can't live with this. And they track the Bigfoot down to the Bigfoot's lair in a cave somewhere, and they take them all out. And then there's no more Bigfoot, which is kind of curious because it's like, well, all the Bigfoot are in one family in one area. Both these stories have that, but I don't know. Then also one curious thing is in either story, they burn all the bodies. So there's no evidence. Good alibi though. Say we burned them, so we don't have them. Let's see. And there's stories like this from the Pacific Northwest, like I said, stories like this from California. And one thing I think you could, toss in as some evidence is that these things are supposedly keep happening today. I think I did see Troy U4L mentions David Paulides has his new film on Sasquatch this month in Tacoma. Oh, I didn't know Paulides was doing a movie on this. If you haven't watched anything by David Paulides, fascinating guy. He's a ex-detective from San Jose who started looking into disappearances, especially in national parks. And I think we might have talked about this before, but he's the guy who presented the heat map of specifically the United States, but let's say North America in general. And there's just bright, glowing, white hot spots over Yosemite and in the Sierras. And they don't know why these people are going missing. So he posits that it could be anything from, criminals, could be serial killer, could be multiple serial killers, could be aliens, could be just people getting lost, and it could be Bigfoot. And those are just a couple of he doesn't really profit a whole lot of reasons. He just kind of tells the story. Troy, do you know what he says about Bigfoot? All right. And also, guys, let me know what you think in the chat. Did it really happen? Let's see. Oh, yeah. Thanks. The word I was looking for is acronym. It's amazing how your brain just farts out as soon as you get in front of people. As soon as you try to look smart, you know what's going to happen. Let's see. Ivan says, I like cryptids as much as the next person, but extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and they do not have that. That's where I land too. But it's a hell of a story, right? It's fun. Mojo says the killer could be Garth Brooks. Man, I'd love to wedge that into a live stream somehow. If you get bored of history and need a break, Google the Garth Brooks tour maps with the people gone missing and murders. I don't know how many times I can say that on a stream, but yeah, look that up. I'm not accusing Garth of anything. I'm just saying it's rather coincidental. Let's see. We have archival documentation and newspaper reports back to 1800s. Yeah, absolutely. That's kind of why I say it's not impossible. There is written evidence of Bigfoot dating back at least to the early 1800s, and then that's just printed, right? There's oral traditions that go back centuries. And like I said, it would be kind of curious to just have tribes that are separated by a continent or half a continent coming up with, very, very similar accounts. I would just say I don't know that this particular incident happened. Let's see. And yeah, really, lots of native lore is replete with cryptid encounters, right? Like the Wendigo, we talked about that on the Halloween episode. All kinds of skinwalkers. I guess that's kind of the Wendigo, the chupacabra, and all kinds of like just morphed animals. It'd be like the head of a bear, the body of an elk, stuff like that. I'm kind of just making that up, but lots of stuff where it was like uh, uh, just animals morphed together. Let's see. Pennsylvania Plowboy says, I think it happened, but more believable. It was more likely a hermit and his family, and they converted it to make it more exciting. Yeah, so it probably was like a person or a weirdo group of family that were out there harassing the Choctaw. Yeah, and it's a good alibi to say, no, we killed a bunch of Bigfoot, not people, and just kind of walk off. Let's see. Mojo says he's seen a Wendigo and a cop shot it. It was wild, but it was like a shadow creature. You serious? Anybody else seen a cryptid of any kind? Oh, Troy says Survivor Man has a Bigfoot series on. Oh, he has a movie on Bigfoot. Survivor Man, Les Stroud has done. He's like second only to Art Bell in proliferating Bigfoot. He has gone out in the woods numerous times. He absolutely believes. That's kind of another good point. Like, who am I to say Bigfoot doesn't exist when the guy who makes his living in the woods says he does? Oh, okay. Mojo says no. A cop got okay. There was an officer shooting and not a Bigfoot shooting. Okay, okay. Let's see here. Pet Detective said it would be great if they were proven right. I agree. It would be interesting. Dan Robertson says he doubts it. You guys are so cynical. Just kidding. The Lore Job does a better job covering these Mr. Pursing stories. Yeah, the Lore Lodge is a fantastic channel. That's another one. If you haven't checked out the Lore Lodge and you like this type of content, Lore Lodge, Mr. Ballin. I'm sure I'm leaving somebody out. Great channels, though. Let's see here. Yeah, what I thought was really interesting and what I really kind of learned researching this was just how many Bigfoot reports come out of southeastern Oklahoma. And I'm just down in Texas. It's not that I'm like completely unfamiliar with Oklahoma, but you think of Oklahoma, you think plains, and it's like, well, you should see the Bigfoot coming from a mile away. No, there's really thick woods there. It's really kind of mountainous. And now that I think about it, no, I learned about this when we did the Navajo versus Comanche, the Wichita Mountains attack, where baby Quanah Parker got attacked by the Navajo. So if you haven't seen that one, go check it out on the channel. I'll link it when I'm done. It's easier to find it. Let's see. Shane Dustin says that he and a friend were out on a hike and that it stood up on its hind legs and ran into the woods. Or a friend told you that. Yeah, that's not completely unfeasible. That happens. They've seen there's bear that injure their front paws and walk around. They teach themselves to become bipedal. And if I had to guess, it's like I would think centuries worth of Bigfoot stories, several of them at least could be attributed to that. Because it's not just completely unheard of. Not saying so. Imagined Mountain says, not saying I believe in Bigfoot, but I've had two unexplainable encounters in the Fitzpatrick Wilderness in Wyoming. Be a little more specific then. What does that mean? That's scary just to read it. Oh, Mojo says he saw a Wendigo that was 9 foot tall, stretched out at the torso, super jacked with a deer head. Damn, bro. He says it looked ghoulish. Yeah, I bet it did. Where was this at? Man, maybe you guys are kind of changing my view. Maybe I'll leave this believing in the Bigfoot war. Yays or nays too. Keep letting me know. Do you believe that the Choctaw had a war with the Bigfoot? Shrooms involved, Dan Robertson asks. No, I mean, that doesn't mean that they were involved in this case, but they were the peyote and other similar, other ceremonies were popular amongst Oklahoma and Texas tribes. That was like a big deal with Quanah Parker. When he converted to Christianity, he was like, this is in the early 1900s. He's like, listen, like, I'm down to follow all these rules. Everything's cool. We're all squared up, but I'm not giving up the peyote. Oh, and yeah, great point. So Dan Robertson brings up something else I wanted to talk about. Bear with me here, but there's lots of positing the theory that Bigfoot is an interdimensional being, meaning he can switch from the third to the fourth or more dimensions. Um, that's becoming a more and more popular concept. I think if you've heard, I'm not vouching for the guy, right? But if you've heard the clip of Alex Jones talking about the demonic being interdimensional beings, I think that's akin to how many native tribes viewed it. They didn't view it as linearly as we do. They thought, well, animals can shift, or some creatures can shift in and out of realities and in and out of dimensions. So seeing an animal and then having it disappear wouldn't negate the truth of a story to them necessarily. Mojo says, I hope I never see the Wendigo again. I hope you don't either, bro. That'd ruin my day. It was out of Hillside. Where's Hillside at? So do you think, also, let me know, do you think it's possible that Bigfoot could be an interdimensional being? Let's see. Blakely says it's hard to doubt Les Stroud. It's true. It's true, right? Like a guy that works at the sausage factory telling you how the sausage is made. It's like, well, I got to listen to him. Troy says, I grew up in a logging camp in Southeast Alaska. While trapping for mink and marten, had some very strange feelings. Yeah, I bet, man. That would be Southeast Alaska. That's a hot spot too. Lots of people still trap up there too, huh? I had somebody in the comments about the Day in the Mountain Man 2 days ago remind me, and I knew this, but I kind of, I guess, forgot about it or didn't bring it up, that you could still make a living as a trapper. So lots of people do. Space Cowboy, what's up? Good to see you, man. If Wendigo is real, it's definitely an evil spirit. Yeah, I think we kind of look at it, like I said, in a kind of from a linear viewpoint, where it's like, or a myopic viewpoint where it's like, well, if we can't see it, we can't hear it, feel it, touch it, it's not real to us. And that's not necessarily how native tribes viewed it. Now, this particular case with the Choctaw and the Bigfoot, they did believe it. They thought, like, no, these are real Bigfoot and we have to go get them. But there's little to no contemporary accounts of it. So it's hard to justify this one in particular. Though it's fun to talk about, right? It's fun to talk about. Oh, and also I'm looking for some more stuff like this. We've got a couple like alien sightings by Old West towns, Wendigo sightings, werewolf sightings. It's not like a new phenomenon. They just couldn't make a Reddit post about it, you know? Let's see. Imagine Mountains. You're telling us a crazy story. Hold on. What's this say? Not saying I believe in Bigfoot. Okay, so you were in the wilderness in Wyoming, and when you came back in the morning, both hindquarters were gone. Well, that's not good. That's a sign to get out of there. No tracks anywhere. Bro, you got to bail. I'd like to think that I would always survive a horror movie because my first instinct is like, well, time to go. Wendigo is a cannibal spirit who takes over a person during times of extreme hunger. Elite Super Grunt says, there's a cool movie based on the legend. What's the movie? We might watch it. The woods of the Pacific Northwest are so dense and rugged that an intelligent creature could hide for a long time, Blakely says. Yes, they could. All right. And I'm with you on that. And I think the same about the redwoods in California. Anything from the Sierras on up to British Columbia, right? It's so dense and so isolated back there. Is it impossible? No. But I think with heat-seeking radar, My hunch is that they would have found something. But then you think about people that go missing, and it's like they don't find lots of these people because, yeah, that's nice. You got heat seeking radar, but you got millions of, oh, I don't know, millions of acres, millions and millions of acres to cover to try and hunt down these creatures. Like it's still not inconceivable, right? That they could stay undetected. Let's see. A giant creature can't simply. So Dan Robertson says a giant creature can't simply hide. Survival comes with a lot more necessities than concealment. True, and I agree with that. But if they're able to hunt, if they know the land, if they've survived out there for centuries or eons, then I guess I'm playing devil's advocate here, or Bigfoot's advocate. But it's not impossible. Pet detectives, you're in the chat. What do you think? Let's see. I know you're in there somewhere. Mojo says, still makes me feel weird thinking about the Wendigo. It would be weird if it didn't make you feel weird. Elite Grunt says, the name of the movie is called Ravenous. It came out in 1999. Oh, I know that movie. That might be a good movie for us to do a watch party to. Space Cowboy says, what is the estimated population of Sasquatches? Now, that depends on what BFRO representative you're talking to and where they live and kind of how long they've been and what tools they have available. There's estimates from several dozen to several thousand, continent wide, let's say, right? New species are discovered quite often. Absolutely. Absolutely. Broken Bow Mountain and Lake is beautiful in Oklahoma. Would have been a beauty watching them roam in their formal times. Yeah, Oklahoma is, I think, highly underestimated for the natural beauty that it has. Even researching this, I was like, wow, these places are gorgeous. And they haven't been overrun by a bunch of people from California, you know? Just kidding, just kidding. I'm from California myself. Have you ever seen anything weird? You know, I don't know. I spent enough time in the redwoods to think like everything I saw. Yes, I would say, yes, I have everything that I saw in the redwoods. Spent lots of time there growing up. Everything that I saw in the redwoods or anywhere around the redwoods, like whether if it was a gas station, I thought like, this is creepy, you know? What is the Bigfoot's average lifespan? Do they have constitutional rights? I do not believe they do. I think those are reserved for people only. And maybe they could lobby for them, but if you're going to lobby, you know, you got to come out of the woods. Their average lifespan, I've seen different estimates on that too, from a couple decades to like, well, they're interdimensional beings, so they're essentially, you know, immortal. Trill Texans says, I'm in Texas. We are overran by Californians. Sorry about that. Sorry about that. But I always say, like, I'm from a really rural area in California. It's a lot more like Lubbock than Los Angeles, you know? So they're not all bad. They're not all bad. Most of them. Let's see. I support arming Sasquatch. Well, if he's got constitutional rights, then they would apply, right? Elite Super Grunt says around 10,000. That's what you're estimating. 10,000 Bigfoot. I mean, let's see. Spread over 50 states. Let's say that's spread over like half the states. What'd that average out to? A couple hundred a state? It's feasible. It's feasible. That's not a lot. Let's see. At least California has good. They do. I mean, I've heard, you know. Let's see. I saw a Black Panther in Pennsylvania. I spoke to that already. So you saw a actual Black Panther in Pennsylvania, and they hinted all your life that I'd see something. They told you had like a premonition that you would see a Black Panther in Pennsylvania. It's a great live chat, guys. I love this. The Bigfoot would be inbred as heck with those numbers. Actually, Ivan, that's a fair point. That's a fair point. You can cause yourself lots of problems that way. But where else? What are they going to do? Get on Tinder? You know? Did you see Dan Robertson asked, did you see the Les Stroud Rogan episode? I did. He puts his chips on Bigfoot being real. Absolutely. I think that's a good point, man. It's hard to argue that guy. Short Stories by Kate says, arm the Sasquatch. I mean, I'm not telling him he can't. I'm not taking away his Second Amendment. Okay. If he is entitled to it, if he's entitled to it, then he's entitled to it. I might not hang around him a lot because I don't know what kind of trigger discipline Bigfoots have, but okay. Pennsylvania Plowboy says Bigfoot are like mountain lions. One cat covers a big area, and most people never know that they're there. That's another fair. You guys are really kind of turning the tide, turning my mindset here, changing my mind. Um, yeah, that's a fair point. Even mountain lions in Texas are making a big comeback, and lots of people are shocked by that. They just found several around. There's a bunch around Dallas, a bunch around San Antonio. I think they found a black bear up in the San Angelo area. So how the hell did it get up there? That one's surprising. Let's see. Sam Squatch from Trailer Park Boys. Yeah. A highly, highly underrated show, especially here in America. Lots of people watch it, but still underrated. We should watch Harry and the Hendersons. Oh, yeah. Maybe we should do a double feature with Ravenous. Fantastic idea, Space Cowboy, excuse me. Let's see. That's a good idea, dude. I like that. We're going to write that down. Double feature here. Those are fun. Are they not fun? We're just hanging out watching a movie. I like that. Double feature. Cool, dude. Let's see. And maybe we should watch along with the Survivor Man episode. I didn't realize we'd have this many staunch squatchers in the audience. But I'm pleasantly surprised. Let's see. Make sure I'm not. These comments are gold, guys. They're gold. Yeah, there's lots of accounts of Sasquatch just popping out of the woods and like taking out a cow, taking out popping the heads off of lots of stuff. That seems to be like their MO. They love popping the heads off things. Which I guess if you're that big and strong, it's a good tactic. All right, let me scroll through the notes real quick. Let's see if I'm missing anything. I was surprised like exactly how many tribes have a story involving their own Sasquatch. Probably the craziest one. Man. Maybe the craziest thing about this to me is that they had a family named Tubby. Let's see. Sasquatch was an escaped alien experiment when they were creating humans. Mojo, you'd be a fun guy to have a beer with. Have any Bigfoots won or been nominated for a Nobel Prize? No, but I mean, they'd be just as entitled to it as a lot of people that have won it. What is your favorite OK Corral tombstone? Oh, that's a good question. I don't know. I'd have to look around and think about that. Mojo says, I just think different is all. Well, you're in the right spot. Let's see. The word Sasquatch is from Salish. Yeah, we covered that at the very beginning. It's spelled like, it's kind of a two-part word, like Suske. Let's have it in my notes here. Sometimes the native pronouncements, they're not even like that hard phonetically, but if your tongue isn't used to saying them, let's see. Sasquatch. So you can see the etymology there, right? I do think it's interesting that like no hunter has brought one in, especially in the 19th century. Teddy Roosevelt, we covered this in our Halloween episode, but he supposedly hunted a Bigfoot, like had a Bigfoot encounter. I mean, he put it in his book, and I was saying in the Halloween episode, it'd be like putting a Bigfoot story in like The Art of the Deal or something, right? Like it's like a presidential book. It's written by a president, so it's an odd thing to sneak in there. Nothing wrong with different thinking. That's right. That's why we're all here. A frozen ape man. I don't know about the frozen ape man. Enlighten me, Super Grunt. Is it just like an ape man, but frozen? Is he still alive, but just cold? Yeah, Troy says, I think Les and David Paulides are, Les Paul and David Paulides are drawing a connection between the missing people and the hairy man and the UAP sightings. It's a concerning thought. Yeah, it is concerning. I mean, as viable as any other reason. Like, why are all these people going missing? Like, a certain amount you're going to have to assume are going to go missing in any wild, expansive area. But one look at this heat map, and it's like, if it's just glowing over Yosemite, there has to be some common denominator there, right? We're talking hundreds of people, and it's over years, but it's a ridiculous amount of people. And I've also heard theories that anywhere that has lots of granite attracts, activity like that. But there's lots of places with granite that don't, but Yosemite has a lot of granite and a lot of strange stuff going on there. I'll be honest, like, I never liked spending a lot of time in Yosemite. Grew up an hour and a half away, and it always gave me the creeps. It's called the place. Yosemite means the place worth killing for. It just never seemed, it's beautiful, but it just never seemed like good stuff happened there. Elite Super Grunt says the Minnesota Iceman, right? It seems like every state has their own iteration of ape man. They're just so prolific. And I don't know, like, it is kind of strange that everyone has this story. And if there's absolutely no truth to it, it's like, well, again, where did it come? Why would people just make this up out of whole cloth? There's really no benefit in it for them. Have I heard? Oh, Nick Fodness. Oh boy. Have you heard of feral people? Have I heard of feral people? Dog. I have spent many hours, and I would not say wasted hours. I would say hours well spent looking into the feral people. It is, oh boy, it's a rabbit hole. All right, let's dive into it a little bit. So the feral people are people who it's like what it sounds like. People who live in the woods, have either checked out of society or never part of society, have been up there for generations, and they are alleged to be everywhere from the Sierras to the Appalachians to East Texas, anywhere there's deep woods. And there has to be some truth to that. Like, there are definitely people out there. There are probably a fair amount of them. Some of them have probably been out there their whole lives. Some of them are running from the law. Some of them are just tired of being in society, but they are out there. And the tales go back hundreds of years. They even go back across the ocean to Scotland, where was it Sawney Bean? A whole family was living in a cave, and they were cannibals, and they were like highwaymen. Basically, they would accost travelers and kidnap them and take them back to their cave. And I think the townspeople found them and killed them all in a cave too. So again, a very common story. You track them back to the cave and you take them out. But there's, tons of really creepy accounts from hikers on the Appalachian Trail, in the Sierras. I'm trying to think. I said East Texas, several other, anywhere there's tons of woods. It's just like they'll find people's garbage and refuse. They'll find markers that are not congruent with any trail markers that we know, but obviously someone's cut a sign into a tree or something. Find campsites, and it's not just homeless people or people experiencing houselessness, right? It's people that have clearly been there for a long time. It's literally the hills have eyes, right? Elite Super Grunt says, right? Oh, West Virginia, right? Anywhere up and down the southeastern seaboard. Oh, Western New York. So anywhere that's got lots of woods. Tons of theories on that, tons of encounters. And that's one that I think it's like, yeah, well, I have no doubt that that's true. Ivan says, my favorite Sasquatch story is when he walked up to a camper, poured himself a cup of coffee, and whispered in the camper's ear, "No one will believe you," and walked off. That might be my favorite too. And he makes a hell of a, what is it, beef jerky commercial? The natives that live in Hoona, Alaska, talk about a young man that went on a visit to the wild and lived, but some never came back. Right? Yeah, there's lots of stories like that, and they date back hundreds of years. And it's like, well, it's not even hard to believe, right? And that's, to me, infinitely creepier than Bigfoot or any cryptid story, because it's just like, I'm positive that's true. It makes me not want to go out to the woods. I'll still go out there. Don't worry. We're big tough guys here. but I'm just saying, eyes in the back of your head, right? And really, they span continents wide. There's reports of this from Asia, Europe, Russia. That'd probably be the scariest one. Obviously, Australia, right? I think Australia has its own ape-man iteration as well. Yeah, tribes had misfits of it. Exactly. So anytime you have a society, you have people that either don't want to or can't fit into that society and often remove themselves. What do y'all think? Would you rather run into a Bigfoot or a feral person? Oh, Elite Super Grunt says it's the Yowie from Australia. Right. Okay. Okay. The Yowie. We said Nepal has the Yeti. China has one. I don't know if Japan has one. Vietnam has one. Dan Robertson says, were they the builders of the pyramids? The Bigfoot or the feral people? Either way, I doubt that. But it wasn't the aliens either, I'll tell you that. Troy says he would rather run into Bigfoot rather than the feral people. Feral people are a thing. Never heard about that, says Short Stories by Kate. They are a thing. It is a hell of an internet rabbit hole to dive into. Actually, there's accounts that people, it's a government conspiracy. So from things where they're hiding people they've experimented on to their prison camps that people have escaped from to actually I heard one theory or one account of a guy traveling in the land between the lakes, which is in Tennessee. Is that right? I believe Tennessee and maybe Kentucky. So it's what it sounds like. It's between two lakes. There's these large forests, and the guy was traveling back there. It's a national park, and drove way back down these roads, right, and came upon an entire village of Southeastern Asian people. And he said, like, he thought maybe Hmong or Vietnamese. Like, I know those are two distinct cultures. And they didn't pay any attention to him. It was just like a village, like nothing off-putting about it other than its location in the middle of nowhere, right? You just turned around and left. But there's theories that like, oh, that's people that were refugees moved here after the Vietnam War. They didn't know where to put them, so they dropped them off. These people who were used to living in the jungle, they dropped them off in national parks. And it's like, I don't know, like that doesn't sound too far outside of our government's purview, right? Got enough on my plate with Bigfoot to not dive into the feral people thing, says Short Stories by Kate. I don't blame you. There's only so much time in the day, right? I just have to write most of the day, so I have things going on in the background, and sometimes it's sports documentaries, sometimes it's feral people stories. There's a lot of feral people stories, though. And they're scary. They're creepy. Dan Robertson says, Land Between the Lakes is in Kentucky. Let's see. Oh, yeah. Mojo says a Japanese soldier stayed in the woods until 1974. So 30 years. That's absolutely true. He was a danger to the local villagers. I think him and his boys, like, because it wasn't just him the entire 30 years. There was like a small platoon of them. And at first they were still fighting the Filipinos. And then they were just like, all right, we're just going to steal food from you guys. And then, that crowd was withered away over the decades, but they would not surrender. And they finally found one guy and they were like, listen, man, like, you don't even have to surrender. Just say like, okay, I'm coming out. And they brought him out, and he looks like a guy who was in the woods for 30 years. Dan Robertson says they dropped him off in Kentucky. Yeah. I mean, I don't know if they did, right? But that's, again, something I didn't think was wholly unfeasible. Napoleon, Russia. Let's see. What do you mean by that, Mojo? Napoleon, Russia definitely does. Because that sounds interesting. Napoleon. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, so Napoleon in the chat here. I bet my bottom dollar government has a black budget organization like Monarch from the Godzilla movies that keeps tabs on all of this stuff. Listen, man, like, I'm not agreeing with you, but you never know who's listening. Yes. Let's see here. Yeah, there's lots of lots of theories that they are escaped or turned out MK Ultra patients, subjects, I guess we'd say. Could it be modern day vampires? Nick Fodness says. I mean, define vampire, right? Could be. Let's see. Scrolling through the comments here. So many good comments tonight. Space Cowboy says they could be Nephilim. Could be. That's an interesting rabbit hole itself. Pennsylvania Plowboy says, I would rather run into feral people. Really? Can you elaborate on that? That's an interesting take to me because it's like, I don't know. There's a lot lower chance of, I don't know. I guess if Bigfoot's popping heads off, it's a good point. He might just pop your head off, but he might be cool, right? And I'm sorry, but the feral people, they're going to just be weird. At least I don't have to talk to Bigfoot. I don't want to make small talk with a feral person about whatever. Hey, how's the weather, man? And he's just like over there rocking back and forth or something, or biting a fish's head off. It's be awkward. Nothing I hate more than awkward situations. There was a father and son from Vietnam that hid in the jungle for decades. The son didn't even know what a woman was. I think everyone else can fill in that joke for themselves. There were giants on the earth in the old days when the sons of God came in under daughters of men. Yeah, that's another like Bible rabbit hole for sure. And something that I don't find wholly unfeasible, no pun intended, but like WHOLLE, wholly unfeasible. Let's see. Rolling through the comments here. Yeah, everybody should have posted a poll like feral people or Bigfoot, who do you want to run into? And who do you think the feral people are? Everybody familiar with like MK Ultra? It's a hell of a rabbit or a hell of a turn to make from a Choctaw podcast, right? But I got to figure out how to post a poll. Oh, start a poll. Okay, let me post it here. Would you? Everybody will get their chance to vote. Bigfoot, I don't know if he has constitutional rights, but you do, and you can vote. Would you rather run into Bigfoot or feral people? Has anybody out there run into feral people? All right, poll list posted. Let me know what you think. Feral people are just your average West Virginians. Now, I've met West Virginians before, and they're good people. Randy Moss was a West Virginian, one of the best receivers of all time. I would rather run into Bigfoot any day. Yep. Don't forget to vote. I guess the more operative question then, all right, Bigfoot's maybe interdimensional, maybe not. We don't know how he got there. We don't know who he is, but we know he might exist. We are very sure feral people exist. Where do you think they came from? Do you think they grew up out in the woods, or do you think they escaped, or do you think they were put there? What's your guys' take? I think it's probably a combination. Myself, Elite Super Grunt says he'd rather take Bigfoot. Don't forget to vote. You have to make it official. Oh, wait. I didn't put... Well, vote... Sorry, this is my first poll. So vote yes if you would rather run into Bigfoot, and vote no if you'd rather run into the feral people. Learning as we go, folks. It's a rock and roll show. Let's see. I'm sure there's an episode about Bigfoot on In Search of... Oh, yeah, with Leonard Nimoy. Well, that guy was looking for everything all the time. It's like, bro, aren't you part of the Star Trek show? How much time do you have? Short stories by Kate. I'm gonna have to look up these feral people now. Look them up. It's a great rabbit hole, and it's one where you're like, yeah, I'm pretty sure some part of this is true. Like if you're gonna doubt Bigfoot, okay. If you're gonna doubt the Wendigo and you haven't seen one, okay, that's cool. We can be charitable there. But if you're gonna say there's no feral people living out in the woods in America, you sound crazy, right? In my opinion. Could be old native tribes that stayed hidden during the times of removal. Yeah, I mean, could be, right? It's not entirely impossible. There are still uncontacted tribes in the Amazon, on Sentinel Island. Have you guys heard the story about the Sentinel Island guy, the missionary? That probably happened. That's a good example happening in the 21st century of what happened to untold people that came out on the American frontier, right? Untold missionaries that were just like, hey guys, I got the good news for you. You're gonna love this, and then they just shot him with a bunch of arrows. And that poor guy on Sentinel Island, like, came there. They were like, "Get out of here." He left. He's like, "I'm gonna go back one more time." Famous last words, right? Let's see. Scrolling through the chat real quick. If you hear me going, I'm looking through the chat. Space Cowboy says there's a channel called Paranormal Paul doing a live stream about Bigfoot. Okay, well, when we're done with this one, go over there. You're pulling traffic away from me, Space Cowboy. I thought we were bros. I'm just kidding. When we're done here, go over to Paranormal Paul. The woods in Carolina are beautiful, so beautiful that you get the feeling that something just has to be out there. By Oxsteel. Yeah, man. Like, I don't know. Personally, I find all woods creepy, but it's a spectrum, right? There's levels to it. Let's see. Oh, Space Cowboy, you're staying put. Yeah, I'm glad you're staying put, man. But when we're done, there's always more Bigfoot info out on the internet for sure. Like I said, I'll post the Bigfoot recordings, the link to the Art Bell shows here when we're done. A lot of people were not told about the dangers of the American frontier. That's true. There was a lot of propaganda in the 19th century. You can see it in the gold rush. They're just like, "Come on out, guys. It's easy living. I know you're tired of being over here on the East Coast and working factory jobs and stuff. It'll be a great time. It's pretty much just it's a Garden of Eden out here. You're gonna love it." And they get out there and they're just constantly getting attacked and starving, and it's a rough time. Let's see. Oxdeal says, yes, the creepiness of the woods are definitely a spectrum. What is on the deeper end of the scale, in your opinion? I think I've said this before, and maybe I'm just being a hometown guy, but I think the California redwoods are the scariest place in America. They're absolutely beautiful. It is, a shocking level of natural majesty for sure. But it is a terrifying place. It gets dark at like 2 p.m. and you can't see anything. Nick Fodness says, I've had a dogman sighting. Seriously. That's a lot of those in the land between the lakes were dogman sightings. I guess I left that out earlier. That's another really common native cryptid lore, or that's a really common native cryptid legend, especially more in Kentucky, Tennessee, then down into the Southeast, dogman encounters, which are kind of, I guess you could classify, Nick Fodness, am I wrong? You could classify that as a werewolf of kinds, like maybe a little farther towards the animal end of that spectrum. Like, I don't know. It depends on the tribe, whether a dog man is a person who turns into a dog man or whether it's always a dog man roaming around out there. Let's see. Dan Robertson, I believe there's a population of peoples, much like a tribe, that lives and reproduces in conditions that produce little more than survival. You mean like us? Just simply existing. I know. Like me? What Lurks Beneath is another good channel that, What Lurks Beneath. That's a good one. Hammerstein Peters, is that right? He does a lot of Canadian stuff. And there's a lot of Canadian cryptid lore. You think like, like couldn't be that much up there. No, there's a lot from the Arctic on down. And they always have like, I don't know, this is just my take, right? The southeast of America and Canada always has like odd names to my ear, like a Pukwudgie and stuff like that. It's like, what the hell? And they'll just say it. I think they're just used to that. You get videos of these people that live in the area and they're just like, oh yeah, we saw the Pukwudgie. And it's like, where did you come up with that name? Why are you so comfortable saying the word Pukwudgie? Hammerson Peters. Yeah, that's the guy. Another one to check out. He does a really good job with his episodes. Really good history too. Let's see. Everybody's kind of talking amongst themselves about what Bigfoot shows to watch next. Let's see. Nick Vodness says, oh, you saw the dog man. It was on the prairie at night and you saw him from a distance and he ran into a group of trees like it was stalking a deer. And he howled. Yeah, it's hard to argue a lot of these things because it's like people that you talk to have personal experiences with them. So it's like, well, who am I to tell you what you saw? Any pet detectives say any forest on a dark night can get you hearing all kinds of things that go bump in the night. Yeah, it's like you get a superpower, right? Like anything out there, you hear a twig snap, and it's like, what was that? I get no sleep out there. My uncle lived way out in the redwoods, and he had a generator. We didn't have electricity. Had a toilet, had a nice shower and stuff, but no electricity. So you'd have to light the place with kerosene lamps, and you didn't want to run it that much because it took up gas. And it was like being there in the 1800s. Like you just have kerosene lamps everywhere, and you're just going like, yeah, this might keep the monsters away, but we're gonna burn this sunbuck down. It was a cool place though. But yeah, anywhere in the redwoods, sorry, it's scary as hell. Let's see. And again, I think if there's feral people out there, it's like if there were feral people, if there are feral people, and I'm positive that there are at least a couple in the redwoods. Let's see. Nick Fodness says he saw the dog man under a full moon. Bro, you don't even look at the side of the road on a full moon. If you're driving, it's just here. You know what I mean? You don't see a lot of creepy things here. You look out in the woods, you look out to the side, who knows what you're going to see. Let's see. Well, we're having a good talk tonight. This is fun. Let's see. So we got the poll back. We've got 80% of people saying they'd rather run into Bigfoot. Smart move. We got some survivors in here. You guys get it. I guess it would kind of be interesting to talk to the feral people about like, what do you eat? Kind of like banally update them on sports scores and stuff. Like, you see the Giants game? Oh, I don't know if we're going to make the playoffs this year. Just keep talking to him like that. You believe the prices of beef? He's just like, what are you talking about? Make it so weird that he walks off, you know? People are very dangerous. That's true. I like to believe most people are good, but the ones that aren't are dangerous. And let me know in the chat too, what's your favorite cryptid? You a dog man person? You a Bigfoot? You like the Wendigo, the Puckwudgie, the giant birds? I saw Bigfoot riding a unicorn while eating Chinese food. Lots of stories like that. I bet the Travel Channel would buy this story. Pregnant 9574 says, I bet they would. You should shop it to them. Pennsylvania Plowboy says he's going out night hunting for coyote, and I only get scared of flying squirrels. I guess it's just my ignorance, but we night hunt for coyotes in Pennsylvania. Well, I know Pennsylvania is just like the middle part, Western Pennsylvania is just like Alabama, right? It's like California. Like I'm like I said, I'm from like a rural redneck area of California. So people ask me like, how often did you go surfing? It's like never in my life, and never am I gonna. Nick Sweeney says the poll is a yes or no. All right, so sorry, that's my bad. First mistake I've ever made. But I didn't post who are you voting for, Bigfoot or feral people, as far as who'd you like to run into in the woods. So answer yes for Bigfoot, answer no for feral people. Bigfoot is my favorite because he's the most plausible. I guess so. I guess, yeah. Yeah, okay, yeah, yes. I guess he is the most plausible. Pregnant 95 says man, bear, pig. Fair. I think I've heard some conspiracies that there is something like actually like that the government created, and it's, an actual creature, but it's very similar to native lore, right? Where they just like stick two things together. Is that like a Dr. Moreau's Island kind of thing? Let's see. Space Cowboy says, I saw a werewolf drinking a pina colada at Trader Vic's. His hair was perfect. If it's the Michael J. Fox one, it's feasible. He had some slick lettuce in that movie. And as the movie shows you, it's all about confidence. Like he transformed species. and he's still pulling the homecoming queen. You got to get the mojo. You know what I mean? You got to surf on a van. Let's see. Buckeye Ranger asks about Mayan monsters. That's actually a great question. I don't know. I haven't delved a lot into South American cryptids, and that would be, there's got to be some bangers down there. And the Mayans were just, sorry, but like super demonic and crazy. Tons of human sacrifice. It was just same for the Aztec. Like those people were swimming in some kind of evil spirit mess, right? And yeah, like don't get me wrong, I'm not whatever being prejudiced against the culture. I'm just saying like probably shouldn't do mass human sacrifice. Just throwing that out there. Didn't work out too well for them in the end anyways. They're more kind of a prophecy based culture, right? Remember in 2012 when everyone was like, the Mayan calendar says it's going to end. And it's like, you guys, Y2K was like 10 years ago at that point. Did we learn nothing? Troy says a crab cat. A crab cat is real? Where'd you hear a crab cat? That sounds almost profane. Dog Soldiers is actually a really good werewolf movie. Never heard of Dog Soldiers. I've heard of Last of the Dog Soldiers. Elite Super Grunt says, I'm not talking about your ancestors specifically. It's all good. I'm just saying it's a circumspect view of a systemic problem within that particular society. We all have our own, right? But that was a real sticking point for the Maya and the Aztec. Really, it's why they got taken down, because so many of the tribes around them were like, all right, we've had enough of this. Let's see. The Y Files. Yeah, that's a channel, right? I feel like I've watched that before. So I got more Dogman Dogman fans than I would think. I thought that was more kind of a regional story, but it seems like a lot of people know about it. And then we've got there's accounts of like giant condor birds or something attacking people. It's like probably not anymore, but there was the California condor. It was massive, so could have happened. It's kind of the pain with all these things. Like, well, could have happened. You have to basically say that about all of it. But it's no fun if you don't say, oh, it could have happened. Got to do, okay. So Space Cowboy says, got to do a show about paranormal experiences during wartime. I have one right now that I would like to share that I found in, I was looking up Bigfoot stuff, and then I guess my feed kind of confuses Bigfoot and feral people stuff, but it gave me a feral people story. Oh, I'll have to look the channel up. I'll try and post it in the description. It was so good about let's call them feral soldiers, right? That during World War I, lots of guys would lose their minds, understandably, during trench warfare, right? So by 1915, I think France has lost as many people as America lost in the Civil War. 500,000 people, over a little of 600,000 people gone in one swoop from one country in a matter of months. I don't even think that was the whole year of 1914. So this war devolves from charges into trench warfare. A lot of guys would just break, like they would make them go over the top, and they're just getting mowed down. They're just sending, huge waves of guys. Many of them would lose their minds, and the story is that they would fake an injury, fake being shot, something like that, or be actually injured, fall down in the middle of no man's land, this big expanse between the trenches. And after a while, they just started congregating out there. They would dig out a hole to live in. They'd dig out and kind of live in this communal area, or they'd get 2 or 3 guys together, and they'd survive in no man's land off of rations and stuff that they pulled off dead troops, or they'd raid the trenches. They'd get a couple of guys together and raid supplies from the trenches, and they'd also fight amongst each other. So it just became literal feral people hiding in no man's land, knowing that if they get caught by enemy forces, they're going to be a prisoner, knowing if they get caught by their friendly forces, they're going to be tried and likely executed for desertion, which happened all the times. In World War I, there was like, I think Britain alone executed thousands of their own troops for cowardice or desertion. Yeah, never heard of that, Space Cowboy says. I had never heard of that till last week. And there's quite a few contemporary accounts and enough accounts of people hearing guys like in between the trenches at nighttime. They would hear guys like scurrying around out there, and they know it's not far enough to be the enemy trenches, and it's not wounded people yelling and screaming for help. It's like guys clearly scurrying around out there, and it obviously was disconcerting. Wartime Stories from Mr. Ballin's a great show. Yeah, absolutely. Anything from Mr. Ballin's great. Let's see. Yeah, has anybody heard of that World War I story of the feral soldiers in no man's land? That's creepy. And again, you'd have to assume, my first thought on that is like, yeah, that's real, because guys just broke, or they couldn't take being in the trenches anymore, couldn't take being sent over the top again and again. And it's years of this, and it's for like yards of territory. Let's see. Troy says, thanks for the Mr. Ballin Wartime Stories. Yeah, that's a great one. I'm trying to think of some more to give you guys too. Obviously, David Paulides, he's got his own YouTube channel. Let's see. Oh, War Stories. Yeah. And they're just great channels to, once you're done with this one, to listen to during the day. Short Stories by Kate says, trench warfare, I would have absolutely lost my mind. Yeah, I think that's the worst war to be involved in human history, in my mind, because there's just so much life lost, so much futility. There was no reason to have the war. And those guys largely knew it, especially by 1915, 16. Let's see. The stories from the Eastern Front. Pennsylvania Plowboy says the stories from the Eastern Front in World War I are crazy. And there's several reports from the Eastern Front. I agree. World War I and World War II, the Eastern Front was the worst place to be in, I think, the entirety of the world at that time. The Russians were sending guys out without without rifles, just saying, okay, run behind this guy. When he gets shot, you pick up his rifle. And if you don't do that, we'll shoot you from behind. Eventually people are going to break under that. And so, yeah, several accounts of hearing or encountering these guys in no man's land. And it would be like encountering a feral person. They're caked in mud. They're on the brink of starvation, experiencing likely severe PTSD with like the 1,000-yard stare. It would be scary. And likely, I think a lot of times the accusations is like, if they see you, they're going to take you out, because they can't have you going back and reporting to your superiors that, oh, hey, there's guys out there living in no man's land. Elite Super Grunt says cavalry charges straight into elite machine gun positions in World War I. Yeah, especially in 1914. Nobody knew how to fight that kind of war yet. So it's just like kind of a steampunk mashup. I think Dan Carlin refers to it as that. If you want World War I history, Dan Carlin's entire World War I series, which I think is like 23, 24 hours in total. Absolutely. That's a must listen to. And it does a great job of setting the scene where it's like, once you're done with that, you're going to be like, no, there was for sure feral people out in no man's land. Let's see. Americans served and some captured during World War I in Estonia and Murmansk. If that's a question, I'm as far as I know, yes. Let's see. Space Cowboy asked if I got a chance to check out Snowshoe Thompson. I did not. It's written in my notebook here, though. I've got like 2 episodes coming out this week, so it's a busy week, but I'm going to check it out. I'll check it out when we get done here. I'm already on the I guess that's not a cryptid, right? But the spooky story trip. Short Stories by Kate says, oh, desertion only for the frontline soldiers, never for a general. Yeah. Ain't that the truth? And really, yeah, that's like their generals. They didn't care at all. Like they're treating their guys like cannon fodder, like literal pieces of chess on a chessboard. They would just move them wherever, have them charge wherever. Honor was still a big point for them at the time. So not retreating, giving one's life in the service of one's country was still seen as an effective means of waging war on the enemy. And it was a lesson they just would not learn. They carried this on, millions of guys getting killed over 3 years, basically. At first, right? And I know it went to 1918, but it's like nothing changed. And then it became, instead of cavalry, now we've got planes, and we've got tanks and flamethrowers, and everything just got worse and worse. And these artillery barrages that the world had never, ever, they didn't even know something like that was possible. It would be like somebody from the 1960s seeing an iPhone today, where they're just like, I didn't even know you could do that, right? It's just completely out of their purview. Not artillery. Like in the 1960s, the guy wouldn't be like, I don't know what a phone is. But to show this extent of an iPhone, and to show this extent of to be pounded by this extent of artillery, was something they had no context for. And I think that's what really drove people crazy. You can see the videos of guys suffering shell shock, and it's like, it's heartbreaking to watch. Nick Fodness says, wave after wave of men, one shot and after another. Absolutely. And the machine gun, people in general, they had the Gatling gun, and they had the Maxim gun was the big technological advancement, especially for the British Army. I believe they had that when they were fighting the Zulus in the 1870s, somewhere in there. And the big saying for them was, whatever happens, we have got the Maxim gun and they have not. Meaning, like, doesn't matter what they do, we've got this firepower, so we're going to win. And that was, all these things kind of coalesced into the worst war the world had seen up to that point. More people died in World War II, absolutely. A more costly war, but without World War I, there wouldn't have been a World War II. And the horrors of it are just something like I don't think we've seen since on that scale. Dan Robertson says, men preferred to die in battle for glory at the time than die an old, weak man. Kind of a transaction. They were more valued at the time. And that's a good point. Like, it wasn't like a compulsory draft war exclusively. Like, lots of these guys signed up in droves. You know about the was it the Friends battalions, where at first they were in the British, they were letting guys all sign up from, oh, you're from the same neighborhood, oh, you're from the same cricket team, right? They'd say, oh, well, everybody can come in and be in the same regiment, and you can serve with all your buddies and your family members, etc. And then within the first year or two, they're like, well, we do that, an entire neighborhood of guys gets wiped out. That happened again and again and again. And so then they started splitting guys up, but they didn't even think of that to begin with. It was kind of this, especially for large countries, this kind of ad hoc recruiting process where they would just let guys in however, right? They wouldn't check their age too much. It was just like, let's just get guys out there. And they lost, I don't think any country had context for how many people they were losing. Let's see. Custer should not have left his Gatling guns. Good point. And there were several other mistakes made in that battle as well. We'll do a live stream on whether who's to blame for Little Bighorn, whether it was really Custer, whether it was his subordinates, Reno et al. I don't think that story, I'm not a Custer fan, but I don't think that story is as simple as they make it out to be. Because they'll say, oh, he was a fool and he tried to charge the village and the Lakota Cheyenne village. And it's like, well, he did that months earlier. It was a pretty common tactic to go attack the village and split the warriors' forces. So I don't know that was his biggest mistake in the battle. And something that I think is often overlooked is his brother, Tom Custer. He had a couple members of his family died there, but Tom Custer was a 2-time Medal of Honor winner. Which is like, bro, if I'm a 2-time Medal of Honor winner, I'm going home. Like, I'm not going out to fight the Lakota some more with you. But he did. Let's see. Same thing for the Vietnam War. Yeah, there was lots of conscription. I think what really kind of was a common thing in World War One was the social pressure, social shaming. Like they had the white feather battalions in England, where women would go around with white feathers, like fluffy white feathers, and hand them out to any men that weren't enlisted or hadn't served, weren't in uniform. And it was this, implied thing where it's like, oh, she handed you a white feather, she's calling you a coward, and that's done publicly, right? So that's the social pressures, especially for young men. Man, just got so many of them to enlist and so many of them killed. And that, I think, kind of set in a certain cynicism to uh, Europe and America, where they would still sign up, but at least a lot of people from that generation had this cynicism after that, like because they didn't see any reason for having fought. Pet detectives say, "I'm constantly humbled by what our young man gave up for me, us." Yeah, it's unbelievable, and they're kids. Anytime once you're over 30, I think you look at anybody 18, 20, 22, it's like these are children that we're sending out there and ruining them, right? I mean, these guys were, man, messed up, understandably so, physically and psychologically. And actually, not to divert, well, to kind of bring it back to our cryptid subject, there's a werewolf accounts, there's accounts of actual wolves, the two of opposing forces unifying briefly so they could fight off these packs of wolves. I think mostly in the eastern theater, but packs of wolves were coming onto the battlefield and just having a feast, right? And they kind of supposedly got a taste for human flesh, and these guys were getting attacked so much they banded together and drove this rabid pack of wolves out. Look up the rock apes in Vietnam. Rock apes. Okay. I knew I left I said earlier there's one in Vietnam, but I couldn't remember what it was called. And that's a simple one, right? Like calling it a rock ape is perfect. That's a good. Yeah, I was okay. Pet detectives. I was just gonna say that rock apes, aren't they a punk rock band? That's a great band name, the Rock Apes. Let's see. Dan Robertson says, I believe other than honor, young poor men were given the chance to fight for king and country. They were provided a mission, comrades, and equipment seemed a bit more interesting than church and chores. That's a very good point, and that ranges back. That's not just World War One. That's not just World War II. That ranges back centuries, right? And it's a fair point because a lot of these guys, we take it for granted now. Of course, you've got vehicles, the internet. If you want to go somewhere, you can at least see it. You can most likely go to it. These guys were going to be stuck in their towns forever. They were going to be doing the job likely that their dad and grandpa had been doing, and they had no, set purpose outside of that. Especially if they're married, they don't have a family yet, and they have no way to increase their social status. Like if you're coming from a poor family, you're likely going to be poor forever. You're not going to be able to gain a lot of status, particularly marital status, right? Which is what young men are looking for. So if you're the one guy in town that didn't go fight in the war, dating market is going to be slim for you, right? And prospects in general, business prospects, your relationships with those around you are going to be strained, and you're just missing out. And in their mind at the time, you're missing out on this amazing adventure. And there weren't unless they talked to their dad who'd been in a war, there aren't graphic war movies. There aren't tons of firsthand accounts of like, oh, this is how bad it's going to be. It was all just kind of new to them. Dog zebra is a Navy term, but I always thought it'd be a good name for a punk band. That is a good name for a punk band. Naming a punk band is tough because it's like you would think it'd be really easy. It's not. You're going to have like a notebook full of names that you pick through, right? And like the best band names are just kind of picked off the fly anyways. Went the Rolling Stones, like Brian Jones was going to book them a gig and they didn't have a name yet. And he's pulled out a Muddy Waters record and it was like Rolling Stone Blues on the LP. He's like, yeah, we're the Rolling Stones. Didn't work out great for him. Worked out great for everybody else. Military service is a free way to see the world. Free is in quotations there, so I can imagine what you mean. And a lot of my friends are vets. It's done great things for them. Pays for college. Yeah, gets them to see the world. Gives you a job, obviously. Great, yeah. Short stories by Kate says, so is joining the circus is a great way to see the world too. Fair enough, yeah. Let's see. Nick Fonda says, it's been the same way for thousands of years. One man picks up guns, bombs, swords, knives to fight for king and empower king and family, land, resources, or politics. And it happens wherever you go. Yeah, I think man is a warring ape, unfortunately. Let's see. Meconium stain is a great name for a punk band. Is meconium a bad word? You gonna get me in trouble, Space Cowboy? Because I damn sure don't know what meconium means. Joshua says, we can't blame any war. They were human and they did the best with what they had. And they did the best with what they had. Yeah, I mean, nobody's hindsight is 2020, right? I think just in practice, the generals of World War I did an abhorrent job in doing their job and adjusting to a new theater of war, because the principles didn't necessarily change, right? You take the fight to the enemy, you take and seize land, you deprive them of their resources, and you know, retain your own resources. But when you have brand new tools, it's like insisting on keeping typing. We're going to use a typewriter no matter what. And then when people bring in computers, you are so far behind that of course your business is going to be, trampled underfoot. So yeah, I have no problem with the people who fought it. I just think it was an atrociously commanded war. Shorts by Kate says Fred Frying Pan and the Skillet Lickers. That's a real thing? That's another great one. A bluegrass band. Bluegrass bands and punk bands have a real kind of overlap in what band names would work for them. Meconium is a medical term. I'll take your word for it. I'm going to start throwing that around next time I'm in the doctor's office. But yeah, I was like, there's lots of cryptid accounts that have come from World War I. That's another interesting rabbit hole. I said the werewolf, lots of ghosts, obviously. And they had just people, maybe the creepiest thing is actually seeing people next to you lose their mind, like just completely detach from reality, which happened a lot. And I don't think any of these guys had any, again, context for dealing with that. It's kind of lightly in the Civil War too. I don't know of any Civil War cryptid accounts, but lots of ghost accounts. And after we're done with this one, we'll do another stream on like aliens in the Wild West, because there's significant amount, a serviceable amount of accounts from that. I think it's weird you don't see a lot of native accounts of aliens, but that maybe just because they didn't write them down. You don't see none. And I'm not a big alien guy, but it's an interesting topic. Are you a fan of the Civil War as well? Yeah, I'm a fan of all history. Really kind of what got me to start the show was growing up on the Ken Burns Civil War documentaries, because our show is not that far off from that, right? We have like a guy talking and then a couple pictures and then some video and a guy talking. We kind of follow that rubric. Fan of the Revolutionary War. I'm not a fan of the actual wars themselves, but Spanish-American War. We're going to do a Spanish-American War stuff here pretty soon. War of 1812. Most American history is particularly interesting. I'd like to do some stuff from South America too, like the I can't believe I'm forgetting it now. Paraguay and Uruguay had a devastating war with some fascinating battles, some really fascinating geopolitical rationale behind it, and one that isn't talked about a lot. And I think it was like, Uruguay lost 90% of their fighting age males. So just devastating, just an absolutely devastating war that at least in the Northern Hemisphere, we don't know that much about. It's a Northern Hemisphere, right? West, East, North, South. Like, I don't really care. Northern Hemisphere. Let's see. Bigfoot sightings from the Civil War. Oh, there are. Okay. I didn't see those. Not surprising though, right? Those guys are all out in the same woods. And that would really be about 5 to 10 years after the 1855 Choctaw encounters. Space Cowboy says, I watched Sleepy Hollow last night. Dude, Sleepy Hollow is a fantastic movie. I think some people see it as like campy, and it's like, man, I'm not even like the biggest Tim Burton fan, but that movie I think is so entertaining, has such great uh, costumes and storyline. I think it's a fair glimpse too. It's a little campy, it's fun, but it's got a fair glimpse into life at that time, how people interacted and what they wore. And it's just a really interesting story. And there's some like historical precedent for, obviously, the way they portrayed it, like the Hessians coming over to fight for the British is like, yeah, that's a real thing. That there is an account of a Hessian losing his head to a cannonball, and that's supposedly where Washington Irving got the idea. And he just pulled a lot of names from his real life too, just like people he knew, like people he kind of knew. Ichabod Crane, I think, was when Washington Irving was serving in the Navy, he met a Marine officer named Ichabod Crane, and they weren't boys. He didn't know him that well, but he's like, it's a good name, going to use it. Great movie, though. Maybe we should do a watch along to that. I don't know. I really like that movie. I think it might be worth it. Dan Robertson says, can't wait for this Revolutionary War series. Yeah, man, I wanted to get out this Young Washington episode this week. It might be Sunday when we get the Young Washington one out. A really good episode, I think, on Jumonville Glen. Because Washington was a pipe hitter back in the day. He supposedly just took this guy out with a hatchet. Which is like, hey, man, like maybe, we look at him as kind of a more well-to-do general later on in life, which is because he married the richest lady in America. Baller alert. But he also was hardcore. He came from like a decent family. It wasn't like he was destitute, but he didn't have a lot, and he worked his way up through the British Army, and he was out there hacking fools with tomahawks, just getting down. Let's see. What do you think about the tribes of the Amazon? Nick Fodness asked. We did an episode on the Amazon on he was part of the Pizarro expedition. Like I said, these names kind of get mixed up in my head. But they supposedly encountered the actual 10-foot tall Amazonian women. And it's another one of those where it's like there's so much documentation of this and so many corroborating accounts from all the guys that were there that it's like, even if they didn't see the entirety of what they're saying they saw, let's say they saw half of it, that's still crazy. And there's no reason for them to make it up. Yeah, the tribes on the Amazon as a whole, the way the Spanish encountered them, it started with going down the Amazon. And it's interesting because it's like in North America, some of them were cool and some of them were just like, you need to get off our land. And it was such a extensive process. Like we think it happened, I think we think of it as like a day, and it's like, no, this happened over a year. So like they'd spend weeks with some tribes, and then they'd spend days at a time on the river fighting tribes, and they'd try to come ashore and they'd get driven off and they're starving and they're injured and, bug bites, and they're just miserable the whole time. Maybe that's why the story is so interesting, but it's a good one. It's, I think it's Spanish soldiers versus the Amazon. So look that up on our channel. And we'll do more on the Amazon too, because there's so many great stories from that from this book. Oh, I believe it's called the River of Darkness. I forget the author, but absolutely, if you're interested in that, look up that book, The River of Darkness. It's just a whole account of the Pizarro expedition. Dan Robertson says, Ballad of Buster Scruggs. Yeah, I need to watch that. And we could do a watch party for that too. So it's told through the life of the San Saba songbird. Absolutely. Okay, we'll do a watch party for that too. And I'm thinking about how to structure things for members only too. So maybe we can mark out some specific movie night movies for members only, specific streams and stuff like that. Because there's so many. I kind of just thought like, let's watch The Revenant. That'd be fun. But then it's like, well, everybody had a good time with that, and there are so many movies that we could watch. And also, everyone keep assembling your top 5 Westerns, because we're going to be doing that as well. I've got a stream coming on the top 5 or the most underrated Westerns as well. All right, scanning through here. Anybody else got some more cryptid stories? If you got a cryptid story, drop it in the chat. Or am I missing something in American history where there was a Bigfoot sighting? I didn't find a lot in colonial America. Found several in California. There are some gold miner accounts of, I don't know, I didn't see any direct accounts of Bigfoot, but obviously plenty of stuff. Well, I heard something in the woods and it freaked me out. And I talked about this last time, or I talked about this on the Halloween stream. To me, the scariest thing that you could have happen on the American frontier would be hanging out at night with your Native American guide and you hear something like out in the woods and you're like, all right, well, like, what was that? And if he says, I don't know, that's when I'm scared. Because it's like, it's kind of your job to know. What do you mean you don't know, right? But that happened. It happened quite a bit. And kind of one of the other things, like it could be an enemy tribe. They used a lot of animal sounds as signals. One of my favorite stories, it's in, I forget what episode we have. I think we've done enough where I forget sometimes. But one of the best stories in Empire of the Summer Moon is when, I think it's called The Wolf's Howl. The chapter is called The Wolf's Howl because they're riding along in central Texas, just, maybe an hour from Austin. And they hear this like, oh, and the Lipan Apache guide who is with I think it's the Rangers, he's like, stops for a second and he listens. It's dark. And then he hears another wolf howl and he goes like, and keeps riding. He goes, oh, that's a wolf. Because for a second they thought like this could be the Comanche. And it's like, they use wolf howls to signal. Like it just couldn't be any scarier. Terrifying. Space Cowboy says, I want to get an Aztec death whistle. Yeah, we need to do, I've got a couple episodes on the Aztec and I'm going to do another because I think they are vastly misunderstood, vastly underrated with how again, all right, I'm not being culturally insensitive. I'm just saying, matter of factly, they did some creepy stuff. They did some super creepy stuff and they did a lot of it. Like thousands of people sacrificed a year. The power of sound in a battle is underrated, says Dan Robinson. The rebel yell. Absolutely. I mean, a huge part of winning war is morale, right? And it's like, yeah, nothing gets your morale up and scares your enemy more than just screaming like a madman. And I mean, another example of that is war cries. Those are omnipresent throughout, from Maine to Southern California. Virtually all the tribes use them. Theodore Roosevelt almost lost his life on an Amazon trip. Absolutely. I mean, the guy had chutzpah, right? They planned this whole Amazon journey. They went down there. I forget what they were trying to find. Maybe they're just going to explore. I think he brought his boy Kermit with him, and they thought everything was going good for a while, and then they were almost lost. They were on the brink of death, and then I think they got found and rescued. But it's like, no, they legitimately almost died in the Amazon. And I think later, I think Kermit was, somebody correct me in the chat if I'm wrong, but I think that was the son that went on the Amazon trip and survived with him. Later enlisted in World War I, was a pilot and was killed in action. Something that Theodore, that broke him, that he never really recovered from that. Of all the things that he went through, he lost his mom and his wife, I believe on the same day, and left his family to go be a cowboy for a while, came back, commanded the Rough Riders. He was always just getting into stuff, right? Like he just had crazy stuff happening all the time. Horrific stuff happened to him all the time. And the one thing that really he couldn't come back from was losing his son in a war that he vehemently argued for. Like he was very pro that war. And I think that changed his tact a lot from then on out. He didn't live terribly long past the war, but let's see. American tankers blasted heavy metal during the Gulf War as a form of psychological warfare. Yeah, it worked. Obviously, Gitmo, right? Like Guantanamo Bay has a playlist that made it out in the early 2000s. I think I remember being in high school and hearing about that. Who was on it? Like Metallica. And just I think the Meow Mix song was on there. But yeah, I mean, there's an auditory reaction from people that they can't help. So war cries or loud music, they've been using that for eons, right? War drums and horns. Speaking of creepy, has anyone seen the Germanic horn? That goes up like a dragon's head, kind of, that they would have blown in battle against the Romans. That's terrifying too. They make these weird multi-tonal, like kind of sound. Let's see. Okay, so we're going to underrated westerns here with Troy. Quick and the Dead with Sam Elliott is a great movie, and 1884 Sam has two of my top 5. Absolutely, that's Quick and the Dead. One that I think is, I was just thinking today, one I think is really overrated. I think it's really underrated is Quigley Down Under. Not technically a western, but man, that's a great movie. I watched that like 100 times as a kid. I was trying to think of what else. I honestly think the Comancheros is underrated. I think Rio Bravo gets its props, right? But as like a whole movie, that thing is, you got Ricky Nelson, Dean Martin, John Wayne. Quick and the Dead, short story by The Quick and the Dead is a story by Louis L'Amour. Absolutely. You can't really see it in my office here, but I have a whole shelf of Louis L'Amour books. I grew up listening to Louis L'Amour books on tape, and that's kind of what shaped the channel too. It's like, can't get enough. If you want a good introduction into Old West history, Louis L'Amour is a great gateway. Could you go over the Spirit Lake Massacre? Oh, I've only looked into that a little bit. We might just do an episode on that. Can you jog my memory with Spirit Lake Massacre? I read a lot of massacres. So they kind of get jumbled up in the old brain. Oh, Space Cowboy says Back to the Future 3. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Absolutely. Highly underrated as a Western. It's a good Western. I was trying to think of another one here. I know I had another one in mind, and now it's, of course, slipping my mind. Highly underrated, though. Yeah. Fievel Goes West. Great for the kids. We've got a lot of Quick and the Dead fans in here. That's cool. Troy says, creepy sounds. The Roman used a lead shot that made a screaming sound. Did they really? So the Romans used a lead shot that made a screaming sound as it flew through the air. Did not know that. Fighting creepy with creepy. You know, it'd be interesting too to go back, because the Romans were going into the Germanic forests and fighting the Germans or the Proto-Germans at the time, the Gauls. And it's like, I think the opening scene of Gladiator does a good job of illustrating that, right? Where there's these dark forests with these barbarous people. That was a real thing. So they must have seen a lot of creepy stuff. Like there has to be some cryptid encounters from them. I'll have to look into that. Like a Gallic Bigfoot or something. All right, scanning through here. We're at like what? Oh, we're almost at 2 hours. So this has been fun. Anybody else want to throw in some cryptid sightings? What's your final verdict? Do you believe that the Choctaw had a war with Bigfoot or no? Let's see. It was bad. Okay, so this is the Spirit Lake Massacre. Sorry, I was just scrolling through. I got to find where I'm at. Nick Fondness says the Spirit Lake Massacre was when the natives were angry and came around a lake and kidnapped a woman. There are several different versions. Okay, I'm going to look into that. There are, unfortunately, a lot of massacres in our history. But you know what? There's a lot of massacres in anybody's history, you know? Elite Supergiant says Romans used singers from the Balearic Islands. Really? So they brought like their own choir with them, like the Oak Ridge Boys or something. Yeah, I didn't know that. See, I learned a lot just talking to you guys. And should we do like a Roman battle? That'd be fun to do an episode on. Like we love Old West history, right? But there's so much more to expand on, talk about. Monty Walsh. Short stories by Kate. Who is Monty Walsh? I'm thinking Montel Williams, and that's not Monty Walsh. Lovelock Cave Giants of Nevada. Oh, is that the big redhead people, Space Cowboy? I think Josh at Wild West Extravaganza, I think he's done an episode on that. And Who else is it? I'll think of it in a second. Untold History. Another great channel. Go check out Untold History as well. Let's see. Have you ever heard of Todd Standing? No, I have not. I've heard of Todd Sitting. I apologize. Let's see. Legends of the Old West. All right. Anybody else with cryptid encounters? Oh, Space Cowboy says, yeah, those are the giant redheads. Oh yeah, and Legends of the Old West covered them as well. I just haven't been able to like squeeze that into my channel. Do I put like redhead giants versus natives or something? I have to have like a versus angle. That might be a good one to do though. Todd Standing and some cool Bigfoot photos. Oh, Todd Standing had some cool Bigfoot photos in a documentary. Okay. We'll table our official verdict on Bigfoot, right? Our official verdict at HOKC is maybe. But maybe Todd Standing will draw us over to the affirmative camp. I mean, like I said, is it possible? Yes. Is it probable? I'd have to say no, but I'm willing to change. I've got an open mind until I don't. And Space Cowboy says, I could have sworn you did cover them. I did not. No, because I wanted to. I tossed the idea around, but I just had to have a versus angle, and I couldn't figure out how to do that. It can be done. I couldn't at the time. Troy says the airborne is supposedly killed a redhead giant in Afghanistan. I've heard about that too. I think that's on Wartime Stories, the channel. And they do kind of like an animated version of it. But yeah, there's a bunch of cryptid accounts from the War on Terror, specifically in Afghanistan. But there's all I heard John McPhee, a Delta operator, talking to Sean. What's the guy's name that does Sean, ex-Navy SEAL, ex-CIA? They're talking, and he says like there was some place in Iraq that supposedly had been possessed by a jinn or somebody, a jinn meaning like a genie, right? But a bad spirit. Sean Ryan, yeah, it was on the Sean Ryan show, and he said, I don't think he saw it, but he was like, yo, that place was super creepy. Don't go back in there. Lots of encounters like that. And obviously, like, yeah, the giants. And this is all within the last 20 years, obviously. These are contemporary accounts. Oh, Dan Robinson, you're going to Twin Lakes to see the Penateca camp. Really? How big of a camp is it? That's a bigger sub-tribe of the Comanche. The Penateca are kind of maybe a little north of Austin. They were called the Comanche of the Woods because it was like they were the closest to Western settlement, and then everything west and northwest in the Panhandle and West Texas was the Quahati, the Nakoni, the Yamparica. Those guys were way out there. They were like, bro, we don't know what the Penateca are doing. You guys are way too chill with these Americans. You're always, you're too close. You're too close. We got to get out, Me personally, like I would stay in the hill country. If you ever been to the Panhandle, I don't care how many buffalo are out there. There's nothing there. I love it out. It's beautiful. The people there are beautiful, but I'm just saying I'd go crazy. Let's see. Bring on the Roman stories, says short stories by Kate. We will. Cool. Been, thinking about that for a while. Oh, Monty Walsh is the Tom Selleck movie about the end of the cowboy life. Yes. I want to caveat that with the cowboy life will never end. We are not just an American institution. It's a worldwide culture, a worldwide institution, and everybody wants to be a cowboy. You can go talk to a brain surgeon, high-powered lawyer, whatever, business mogul. If you're a cowboy, he's going to be like, damn, you're cool. I wish I could be you. But they can't. Let's see. But yes, Monty Walsh is a great movie. Tom Selleck does some good Westerns. Obviously the Sackets, right? The Sackets can't be beat. Honestly, that's going to go on the underrated ones. Cause I think everybody, Gen X, back, is familiar with the Sackets, and they're familiar with Jeremiah Johnson, and they're familiar with, man, a lot of the Pale Rider, and everybody my age and younger didn't really grow up with that so much. It's more like Young Guns and The Undefeated and Dances with Wolves and stuff like that. That was big in the 90s. But those movies are fantastic. The Sackets are like, you feel like a badass when you get done watching that. You're just gonna, if you have a problem with somebody, you bust into the bar, you shave their face with a knife, and you pour whiskey on their face. Like, that's how you do it. You make a point. Let's see. Nick Fodness says, my grandfather was a young man, swore up and down to the day he died, natives camped out on our farm by the creek, and they would send their youngest child up to the farmhouse to trade for milk. Yeah, absolutely could have happened. It was a much more, what would you call that? Kind of interspersed living experience, especially in the late 19th century. Because not everything hadn't coalesced entirely. Like the late 19th century, early 20th century was a lot more Wild West than I think people give it credit for. Let's see here. Because we were talking about, who's the guy whose head popped off? Got more heads popping off in this episode than any other. But the guy they hung in Texas in 1901, who had one arm and he ate so much and got fat in the jail cell that, like, by the time they calculated the way to put the noose on him, he was all off balance and too heavy, and his little head just popped off too. Let's see. A 13-year-old girl was taken captive during the Spirit Lake massacre. She wrote a book. Cool. That'll be not cool that she got captured, but it'll be easy to find out the story. Let's see. The History Guy's latest video is about the Wickenburg massacre. Oh, okay. That's another. He's like a OG in the History Channel or the History YouTube space. Abby Gardner wrote about the Spirit Lake massacre. Okay. Put that down too. I got to have a notebook out talking to you guys. Let's see. All right, we can start we're almost at 2 hours. We'll kind of edge toward wrapping it up. Any more cryptid encounters? Any more internet rabbit hole suggestions? Cryptid or otherwise? So yeah, we've covered the Choctaw War with the Bigfoot. We've covered Bigfoot as a whole, the Choctaw tribe as a whole. We've covered Dogman. We've covered the feral people. We've covered what else? If you have any feral people experiences, Bigfoot experiences, Dogman, Wendigo, what else? Giant bird, let me know before we check out for the night. Now we've talked about all these scary stories and massacres and terrible wars, and we can all get some sleep after this. Yeah, before we check out, thank you guys for coming by, man. This has been a great time. I'm not seeing a bunch of cryptid experiences coming through, so I guess we haven't had a lot of personal experience with the cryptids outside of the couple chilling experiences we've been afforded tonight. So yeah, we'll wrap it up. We have, let's see, Friday, I believe we have an episode coming out. Sunday, I believe we have an episode coming out. Tomorrow, we'll do a stream. I've got a list of topics. Not sure what tomorrow is going to be on. It might be maybe the special ops in the Old West topic we've been talking about. Got a couple others. I'll have to look through there. I'll post it tomorrow when we finalize that. And yeah, keep watching. We've got lots of stuff coming, putting out shorts, so hope you're enjoying those. And yeah, we've got the pipeline is full, so keep tuning in, and we'll keep putting out. And yeah, thanks again for tuning in. We will see you all tomorrow. Thanks again. God bless.